First Things, episode number 37.
I seem to be lost.
And so you're working around the clock so you don't take time for yourself to feel like an actual human being.
I used to feel like no matter how hard I worked, I was just spinning my wheels.
Trying to be perfect, we try to have everything in place at one point in time, and you can't.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome back to First Things, the podcast dedicated to practical productivity based on modern research. My name is Brandon Vaughn, and it's my goal to help you apply productive solutions to your life to help you live with less stress, greater passion, and amazing results. So good to have you back as we are in Chapter 7 of the Assertiveness Workbook, which is now getting into the practical side of how we can be assertive. We've spent several weeks talking about what assertiveness really is. And like I said in previous weeks, maybe there's a better term for it because many people still think of aggressiveness when they think of assertiveness. And we're not talking about getting your way and manipulating people. We're talking about dignity of choice, respect of choice for everyone involved, for you and for other people. And I'm sure that by the time we end this series and I go into something else, I will think of a much, much better word to use for this. But assertiveness is good. I mean, we are reclaiming this word for our purposes. And we are now getting into not just the definition of assertiveness and talking about all of how we change in that regard, but now we're going to talk about specifics of how we can put this into practice. Today's chapter is becoming visible, nonverbal behavior, and this is all about body language. And I have a special guest on the show with me today. I am so excited and thankful that she joined me on this show, and that is Vanessa Van Edwards. And I've mentioned Vanessa in a previous episode, several in fact. I saw Vanessa on Creative Live, and you know, I'm a big fan of Creative Live, love how they do things, and I asked several of you if you would consider nominating me for an instructor, and I thank you for that. Again, have not heard anything from them about that, and that's quite okay. I even submitted something independently of that and have not heard anything from them. And if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it's not going to ruin my day or my year or anything like that. It's just something that I think would be exciting and maybe it will pan out in the long run. But I saw Vanessa doing the body language course that's on Creative Live, and honestly, it is the best course, I think, among all the Creative Live. I really like Vanessa so much, not only because she knows what she's talking about, but you know I've got a big emphasis on research-based applications. And Vanessa is steeped in research. In fact, we talked a lot before the interview about that, and I'm hopeful that I can help Vanessa and her team with statistics. It'll be more on a voluntary basis, but I'm excited because I believe in what she's doing. And not only does she do things for business, but she goes out to schools and helps kids for free to learn this stuff, things that she struggled with as she was growing up and how she's put this into place. Let me read her bio really quick. It says that Vanessa is a Huffington Post columnist. Her groundbreaking work has been featured on NPR, The Wall Street Journal, The Today Show, USA Today. She has written for CNN, Fast Company, and Forbes. Her Science of People approach has benefited both readers and corporations, as Vanessa has consulted for multiple Fortune 500 companies, including American Express, Clean and Clear, and Symantec. And I am so thankful that she agreed to be interviewed on this show. And now even excited that I might be able to help her do statistical analysis for future research and also help her spread the cause of body language, which I think is a huge, huge thing. Now, before we get into this interview, a couple of things. First of all, this is the second time I've recorded this intro. I recorded this the other night, and I was getting around to editing it. I was going to try to release it on Thursday, and I was listening to this and it sounded so strange and it was very low volume. And I'm thinking, why does it sound so weird? Well, part of me learning is how to use Skype for interviews and how to connect my good microphone to my computer to do those types of interviews. And I didn't do that with Timothy Moser when I interviewed him. I basically just used a little Bose headset and I didn't like the quality of that sound, how it did my voice. So I wanted to hook up my good microphone. Well, I forgot to hook it back up. So basically, I recorded this entire intro with my MacBook's microphone. It just was picking me up, but I was at a distance from it. And so it was just really terrible quality. Now, I didn't want to do that to you guys, so I decided to go ahead and just re-record this. The second thing I wanted to mention to you is that, and we'll talk about this at the end of the show, but I would highly recommend that you check out Vanessa's products, either through Creative Live or through her scienceofpeople.com website. She has some wonderful courses that are available. Her Creative Live course is more of an overall perspective, covering all of the different aspects of body language, but then she has some specialized courses, The Secrets of Body Language for Entrepreneurs, and How to Be a Human Lie Detector, which some people may actually find fascinating. I think her cheapest course is The Secrets of Body Language, which is only $49. And by the way, I don't make any money off of this. So I just recommend you go and support her because she's doing a tremendous work. I don't get anything off of this, so you can go buy 10,000 copies of this, and I don't make a dime off of this. I just believe in it. And if you've listened to me for any bit of time, you know that if I recommend something to you, I really believe in it. And I believe it so much that I would recommend that you add it to your library, like some of these books that we've been talking about, like Neil Fiore's book, The Now Habit, or this one over, the Assertiveness Workbook. And here's the reason why I struggle, and I mentioned this to Vanessa. I struggle so much because my whole exposure to body language studies were primarily read. They were written type of things. And it's hard to learn really good ways of using body language by reading about it. You can pick up some stuff here and there, but when you see it done and you see expressions, and Vanessa is so good to show examples of different types of emotions and how to use your hands and how not to use your hands, and physically shows you that. Seeing videos of this, my friends, I'm telling you, it makes a huge difference. And I would highly, highly, highly recommend that you check them out and put them into practice. The other thing I want to mention, and then we're going to get into the interview that I had with Vanessa, is we are making a departure from the book for this week, but it is the topic of this chapter. This whole chapter was about body language, and I thought, what better thing to do than to talk to an expert in body language, someone that has written a book about it, who has all these video training about it, and I thought it would be a much better use of our time to go through this. But the book still has some great things to go through. He talks a lot about different aspects of how our verbal and nonverbal communication work together, how important the nonverbal really is. And he goes into a lot of different aspects, such as how does assertiveness, passiveness, and aggressiveness differ in terms of your posture? Or how about how you move or your gestures that you make? How about your physical distance from people, or your eye contact, or your facial expressions, or even your physical contact, your voice tone, your fluency, your physical appearance? And we've talked about that before, about how, for instance, many people who have a passive style of communication as their dominant style will often want to blend into the background. So they will intentionally dress in such a way, clothing, hairstyle, glasses, tidiness, everything like this is going to be in such a way that makes them blend into the background. They don't want to be noticed or seen. So the author goes into some really fascinating stuff with this, and I hate that we're not going to cover it, but I do want to encourage you to read this, especially if you have the book. I think that what Vanessa talks about, she covers a lot of these types of things, and then her training goes so in depth into these very things. And this book is great. This chapter of the book is very, very good. But I'm telling you that it is like first grade compared to the training that Vanessa teaches on this topic. So I would highly encourage you to go into this. And the reason why it's so important, and I mentioned this in the interview, is that research shows that at least 60% of your communication is nonverbal. It is through your body language. It is through your facial expressions. It is through your tone of voice. And that's at least 60%. It could be as high as 93%. Now, if it is over half of your communication, it is a very important thing for us to study. I mean, in fact, I wish it wasn't just one chapter in this book. It probably needed to be 4 or 5 chapters in the book. If you're going to implement an assertive style of communication, well, at least 60, 70, 80% of that communication is going to come through your body language. It's going to come through your voice. It's going to come through your inflections. It's going to come through your facial expressions. And therefore, it is vitally important that you make a dedicated effort to think about your body language. And there's some great exercises in the book to try to put this into action, such as taking a walk around town and trying out different types of postures and how you position your head and how you gaze at things, how you can videotape yourself, working on your voice, doing different types of things, maybe even scripted rehearsals of things versus unscripted rehearsals. And there's just a very good bit of information there. So definitely check that out. But anyway, I've talked long enough. and kept you away from a very exciting interview that I had with Vanessa. So we are going to turn now to this discussion of Body Language 101 with Vanessa. Well, I wanted to welcome to the show today Vanessa Van Edwards of scienceofpeople.com. And I first saw Vanessa on Creative Live. This was actually the first time I had seen Vanessa, and I was literally blown away. First, because most of the stuff I've seen on the topic that she specializes was always in book form, and I think seeing it on video was a big missing link to me, but also because she backs up so much of what she says by research. In fact, I don't even know if I've heard anything she's really said where she hasn't backed it up by research, which, is a big emphasis for me on this show. So, Vanessa, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. I love fellow science nerds, so we're going to have fun.
Yeah, this is going to be great. So can you tell us a bit about yourself and what your specialty is?
Sure. So I'm a behavioral investigator, which means I look at the science side of human behavior. So there's so much awesome research coming out of academic institutions and research institutes that I find a lot of it gets lost in journals or our online databases. So what we do is we have a team of researchers who look at the latest research, find things that people can apply in real life, things that they could immediately go, this is relevant to me, pull it out and put it into easy to digest terms. We call it bite-sized science.
And that's great because I found that there's so much great research out there, but most people don't have access to it, or they're not going to spend $100 to get a copy of a 10-page article. So it's really great, I think, to be able to give that out to the masses in a very practical way.
And I have to say, I'm all about edutainment. It should also be fun. So I try to make the science as entertaining as possible. I loved Bill Nye growing up, like Bill Nye the Science Guy. Oh my gosh, when they played him in science class, it was like it made my whole week. So if I can be even close to the female, not as cool version of Bill Nye the Science Gal, I will take it.
That's really cool. And one of your specialties is around body language, and I know you have a lot of interest in lie detection as well. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I got into, I'd always liked science. I'd always been reading science books, but I also really like self-help. And so when I started to get into body language science, I realized that it was actually a nice blend of what the research says and then actually applying it in real life. So my favorite is nonverbal communication, body language, and lie detection science.
So what got you interested in studying people in this way, in their body language? Is this something that you've always been fascinated with, even growing up, or was there anything in particular that started kind of gearing you in that direction?
Definitely. So I had always been interested in people, but from a recovering awkward person's perspective. So I joke I'm a recovering awkward person because I was one of those kids who I just always felt very out of place, especially as a teenager. High school was like torture for me. College was not so much better. I would volunteer for classroom duty because I didn't want to go out to the playground for recess. And I think that I started studying people from a very young age because I felt so different than them. Especially the cool kids, the popular kids, I would just sort of watch them with this fascination of, how do they feel so comfortable? How do they feel so confident? So as I started getting older and sort of embracing my geekiness and not hiding it and being like, you know what, this is what I like, this is who I am, and that's okay. And I started finding friends that supported that. I realized that I could turn that science into, it helped everyone, that a lot of people feel that way. It wasn't just me. As I started to open up to people about my recovering awkwardness, other people started sharing their stories. And so, yeah, I started from a very, very young age, and only in the last 8 years, I've turned it into a career.
Well, that's really very cool. And you actually still go into schools right now and do things for them. Isn't that right? Yeah.
So, most of our business is around online training, our body language courses, as well as corporate training. So going into HR and sales and management and doing trainings. But the pro bono side of our business, we try to go into schools to give a new take on social literacy. So, especially in the digital age, as they're on cell phones even more, I found that actually kids love hearing about science. They love to hear the reason why it's good to look someone in the eye. When we mutually gaze and we make eye contact with people, we release oxytocin. which is the connection hormone. And I've explained this to kids as young as third grade, that when they have eye contact with someone, they really feel connected to them. And we practice and we have activities, and they then understand, oh, I should look up from my phone when someone's speaking to me. Because just hearing, make eye contact with your elders or make eye contact when you speak with someone, that isn't enough. And so we do a lot of work in schools. I have to say, though, when I do high school talks, I still get nervous as if I'm walking into my old high school. So I think it's also kind of like pushing me out of my comfort zone to make me face some of my fears. So
right.
it is good for me.
And as a father of an upcoming teenager, if I was to give a plug, I think it would be great if you might ever consider putting something like that out as a product especially for teenage girls. I find so much of the stereotypes that our world feeds girls, especially women, in this area of body language and expressing yourself and being timid and different things like that. I think that would be a great thing to see. Something I hope maybe you might consider at some point in the future.
Yeah, on my to-do list, my product to-do list, I have a product list of all the courses I want to make. And upcoming on there is one for parents, so specifically body language for parents. I have a whole parenting website on social and emotional intelligence for parents, but I haven't created a course on it yet. So the parent version and then as well the teen version. So it's on the list, I promise.
Wow, that would really be great. I know a lot of people would really be interested in that. So to get into our topic for today, we've been dealing with this issue of assertiveness over the last few weeks and talking about what we can do to not get our way all the time or manipulate. Nothing, like aggressive or passive aggressive styles, but just living in that moment of choice and respect for other people to be assertive. And I read on your site that research shows 60% of our communication is nonverbal, using our body, our voice tone, our facial expressions. And some research even pushes that up to 93%, which is amazing how large that is. And I wanted to know if you could say a little bit more about this and why we are so much better off taking a really good look at our own body language and how we relate to other people.
Yeah, I thank you so much for getting those numbers right, because it's really important to realize that 60 is the absolute minimum. So the lowest study I could find found that 60% of our communication is nonverbal. On the highest end, it was 93%, which is incredible because that means that the majority of our communication, no matter how low on the low end of the scale, is nonverbal. And what I think is crazy is that we are taught growing up to focus on what we say. When we go into a pitch, when we go on a date, we think about what we're going to say, how we're going to convince someone, but we rarely think about how we want to say something. And so that aspect, we're taught all these amazing technical skills, but there's a huge missing set of tools that we already have. And obviously we're born with a body. So I'm trying to teach people how to use it in a really easy way.
And that's really good. So what can we do? Any kind of tips you have? What can we do to be more confident in our body language or to use better body language to make us more assertive? Do you have any 2, 3, 4 tips that you think are really stand out that would really help people a lot in this area?
Sure. So let me just talk about 2 different studies. So bear with me as I explain them. So the first study looked at how confident body language affects other people's perception of us. So when we are in confident body language, other people perceive us as smarter, more intelligent, and more credible. So what is confident body language? There are 3 aspects that make up really confident body language. First, I should actually say nonverbal communication. So body language is just what you do with your body. Nonverbal communication is what you do with your body, what you do with your face, and how you use your voice tone. So confident body language and nonverbal communication is when we are expansive with our body. So we roll our shoulders back, we keep our arms loose by our sides, we don't cross or tuck our legs, and we keep our torso open. So alphas, leaders of groups, typically stand in this way: expansive, loose, calm, and solid. So that's the first thing that gets us hired. They did a lot of tests with hiring, putting people in interview situations. That's the first thing. The second thing is using our hands. So our hands are our trust indicators. In the body language world, we joke that our hands are the windows into the soul, not like the eyes, the hands. And so the more we have our hands showing, the more people trust us. And the reason for this, that they think the reason for this is because when we were in caveman days and a stranger approached us, we looked at their hands first to make sure they weren't carrying a weapon. It was a survival mechanism to make sure that we weren't going to be attacked. And we still do this. Subconsciously, we look at someone's hands first. They found that when people cannot see someone else's hands, our brain can't relax enough to hear them, to trust them. So a really easy thing you can do is, while you're in that confident stance that we talked about, have your hands visible and express with them. So as you talk, you can move them slightly. You don't have to get crazy about it, as long as they're visible. Don't put them in your pockets. Don't tuck them in your purse. Don't cross your arms over your chest. And the last one is vocal power. So the biggest mistake I see people make with low confidence is they use the question inflection. So they say, my name is Vanessa, as if there's a question mark at the end of that sentence. And the problem is, when you do this, it's literally telling someone that you don't believe what you're saying. And so people who use vocal power, the authoritative voice tone, so instead of, my name is Vanessa, they say, my name is Vanessa, right? They go down at the end of their sentence. Non-verbally, we recognize this as humans as a strong person using authoritative power. So that first study found that there was those three things in common. When people were hired, they were taken seriously, and they were seen as credible. And there's a follow-up study to this, which you asked me, how do we use our body language to feel more confident? So body language helps us show confidence, but it also does help us feel confident. So the follow-up study to that first one was done at Harvard Business School by Amy Cuddy. And what they looked at is, okay, they had done this previous study. Body language helps other people see you as confident, but how does it affect your feelings of yourself? What they did is they had people stand in that confident pose I told you about, shoulders back, arms loose, chest open, and legs firmly planted. They had them stand in those positions for 5 minutes. And they split the group up into two different groups. So one group stood in confident body language for 5 minutes, and the other group stood in low confident body language for 5 minutes. So low confident body language is the opposite. We cross our arms over our chest, we cross our legs, we roll our shoulders in, we take up as little space as possible. And they also stood in those positions for 5 minutes. Then they had them gamble, and they tested their hormone levels to see if their hormones changed from when they first started the experiment. And what they found was, which is incredible, I mean, it totally changes what we think about body language. They found that the people who stood in power body language took 86% more risk when they gambled. More importantly, their testosterone levels increased. So just by standing in confident body language, you actually produce confident hormones that make you feel more confident. So it's incredibly important that when you are going to a big event or you want to feel more assertive, you want to actually feel it, not just show it, you can start with your body language. Most people say you have to start with the inside out. And body language, you actually might be able to start with the outside in.
That's very fascinating. One of the things you said earlier about how our voice tone can inflect questions all the time, I heard you mention that first in your Creative Life course, and I tell you, I've been on a meeting with a particular person, and this person does it a lot. Everything they say is like a question, and it's very interesting because I'm trying to listen to what he's saying, but I'm processing and thinking, what's he saying with his voice tone? I'm curious, when you study this so much, does it ever drive you crazy because you hear it all the time in people's conversation? Can you separate the analysis of the person from just communicating with them after you've studied all this?
The funny thing about body language is it doesn't turn off. So I always warn my students before they take my class. I say, now, here's your warning. Okay, you cannot blame me that once you learn body language, especially lie detection, my goodness, when you learn those things, they do not turn off. And so it's a blessing and a curse sometimes in that, yes, you intuitively, you probably were picking up on that person who used that question inflection as this, you wanted them to be more confident. You couldn't quite figure out what it was that was bothering you, but you intuitively already felt that way. When you know how to read body language or you know how to spot lies, you know exactly what's bothering you. So it's not that you're irritated by new things. It's just more that you know exactly what they could fix, and you have to sort of make decisions every day of, am I going to tell this person or I'm just going to let it go?
When it comes to people that are more passive, going back to the idea of the hands, I find for me, I always want to hold something many times. And now with our technology, it's very tempting to always have something to hide your hands, phones and gadgets and things like that. And what you're basically saying is that's not a good thing. If we want to be more assertive and more confident in our body language, we need to really be showing our hands for the most part.
Yeah. I want to say pick your evil. So I would much rather, because I do understand holding an object for comfort. And I actually encourage this with a lot of my introverted students or my really nervous students. I tell them, you know what? If holding a glass of wine, or holding a drink is going to make you feel more confident and keep your hands out of your pocket, I'll take it. Because at least their hands are visible and at least they're not going in their pocket. So I actually don't think that holding an object is so bad, especially if it's a drink, a glass of water, a water bottle, a coffee, a tea. That's way, way better. A phone is okay. It's not bad. The problem with a phone is it makes you want to check it. So if you're going to hold your phone, make sure you turn it off so you have no desire to check it, because for that gets into the science of gazing, which is a little bit different. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah,
it
does. So your second example, I was kind of curious about this, if you'd seen anything on this, where does our body language help influence our thinking per se? Or, one of the things I talk a lot about on some of these shows is some of our stinking thinking, how we think certain things and how it kind of leads us in directions. And sometimes we never really question what we're thinking about who we are as a person or what's the purpose of our life, things like that. I'm curious because that second study sounds like body language and how we do things maybe can affect our thoughts in some ways. Have you seen anything like that in the research?
Yes, very, very much. There's a lot of research that talks about this. I'll use the same study that I just talked about just because it's fresh in our minds. So cortisol and testosterone are the two hormones they were testing in that study. So cortisol, for lack of a better term, the stress hormone. It causes us to gain weight. It slows down our thinking. It lowers our metabolism. Testosterone is, for lack of a better word, the strength hormone. I'm simplifying it. But it makes us think faster. It increases our cognitive abilities. It increases our endurance. So when you have testosterone coursing through your veins, it is your body's way of preparing for a battle. Now, when you're in battle, you have to be able to think very quickly. So going into confident body language, which produces the confident hormone, actually improves your thinking. So it's exactly what you want coursing through your body to have the opposite of thinking, to actually think better, think more efficiently.
Right. So what would be some things that people could do to put some of this stuff in practice? I mean, obviously, I definitely recommend everyone who listens to me to check out your stuff, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit, some of the things that you have. I think training in this is a great thing. Like we said earlier, for lie detection, it can be a blessing and a curse, but I think we need to be aware of how we do communicate with our bodies and how it can affect our thinking, like we just said. But what are some things that people can do to practice this? Are we talking, as simple as standing in front of a mirror and talking to ourselves and watching ourselves, or videotaping, or those types of things, or other things you might suggest for people as well?
Yeah, well, first remember that I think it's good to start with one thing at a time. It can be overwhelming. I had to overhaul my body language completely when I first started reading about body language. I mean, I remember picking up my first book, and I think it went chapter by chapter, like up your body. Like started with your feet and went all the way up to your head. And I remember I would put little check marks in the margin next to things that I needed to work on. And I had a check mark on every single page.
Wow.
Every single thing it said you shouldn't do, I was doing. So I realized very quickly that it was important to do one thing at a time. And the reason for that is because A, it's not as overwhelming, and B, it helps you use muscle memory. So if you are so used to standing in a position where you have your arms crossed over your chest, like that's just comfortable for you because you've been doing it for so long, it's going to take a lot of practice to get out of standing that way. So to rely on muscle memory, what you do is the first few times you go out, you say, I'm going to keep my hands separate. I'm going to hold a glass of water and make sure that I don't cross my arms. After a while, your muscles get used to standing in that new position. So every time you work on something new, it's like you're showing your muscles, this is the way that we want to stand from now on, because also cognitively you understand why you want to do it. Like there's a motivation to do it. So starting with one thing at a time, I think, is really important. And those three things that I mentioned are the three most important things for credibility, trust, and assertiveness. So to pick one of those three or all of those three to start with, starting with a confident pose. Maybe you are you tend to tuck your hands. Like I know a lot of women sit on their hands, so they need to show their hands more. Or using the question inflection, starting with one of those things and working on it one at a time is great. If you're not sure which one is best for you, which happens, then I would recommend filming yourself. And the easiest way to do this, to see yourself in a natural environment, is film yourself when you're on the phone. It's very hard to film naturally when you're with someone, obviously. So I found that if you are doing phone calls with people, even friends, put the camera on in the background, have a really long conversation until you forget about the camera being there, and notice what you do while you're on the phone. How do you sit? What kind of question inflection are you using? Are you using your hands naturally? You'll notice a lot more about yourself just by doing that, so you know what to work on next.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. And so many people have the technology now with these smartphones or computers with cameras on them that you could really do that very easily. Just set it up and just record yourself. I do that all the time with my music. I've realized if I come up with a song idea, I just grab my phone and just stick it right in front of me and record it. It's so simple. And to use that same technology to help us improve and make us better communicators, it's a very simple tip, and I think it's a great tip that we can put into practice.
It's really easy, and it's also it's scary for people who aren't used to filming themselves. That's a really easy way you can do it because you're not asking anyone else to film you. You're not doing it in public, and so it's a nice soft step into seeing yourself on camera.
Right. So I wanted to ask you about technology in terms of ways that people sometimes express their assertiveness and try to avoid contact with people. I was curious your thoughts on this because I've noticed in my own life, because I've been raised from a maybe more of a passive style of communication, typically gravitated toward introvert type of behavior many times. Awkwardness, I can so relate to what you're talking about in the high school experience of feeling awkward. And I find that when people start becoming more assertive or it builds up so much inside that they just have to get it out, they will sometimes direct that more toward technology. So they'll write a 20-page email to someone, or they'll get on Facebook and they'll start saying things, and they'll say things that maybe they wouldn't have ever said in person. And I find even with the best intentions, it can often come across as wrong, even come across more hostile than maybe even the person meant that. And I know that many people are using this as a substitute for actual personal communication. And the thing I love about body language is the most basic form of communication, the old-fashioned way where we're sitting right next to each other. And even right now, we're talking to each other, so we're hearing our voices, or, people can sit across from each other and see how they are behaving, and it changes everything of the dynamic of that conversation. So do you find that as well with people that you work with, that they want to kind of short-circuit this and just go to these substitutes that don't really work very good for communication at all?
Yeah, it happens all the time, and it's natural, because speaking with someone face-to-face is a huge cognitive load on our brain, especially if we're introverted or if someone's passive-aggressive. It's very hard to be aggressive with someone's face. Our brain instinctively knows that gets us into trouble, so it's hard to do that, especially if you're shy. On the phone, it's also hard because you have all the power of voice tone, the kinds of words that we're using, our cadence, our style, our volume. And so email is a much safer choice. So people feel like they can be themselves. It's also very much like an echo chamber. When you're writing something, you're not seeing someone's immediate facial reaction or hearing them gasp or, hearing an awkward silence on the other end. So it serves as they have no checks and balance with someone who's talking to them. And they are free from nerves, especially if they're a nervous or introverted person. The interesting thing is that there's a lot of our communication behind our words, even in emails. So I even teach in some of my courses how your personality comes out even in email. With body language, of course, on a phone, definitely, but there's something called statement analysis. And statement analysis is the science of the words that we use. So how we use our words, the tenses we use, the grammar. A quick example is one of the tips that we learn in lie detection is that liars typically, now there's no one thing that means someone's lying, so don't take this by itself, but typically liars drop pronouns, personal pronouns, when they're writing. So it's as if their brain doesn't want to directly implicate them in whatever they're saying. Now this happened to me by accident the other day. I saw it in action. someone asked to have coffee and I really didn't want to have coffee with them. And so instead of just saying, I don't want to have coffee with you, which is probably what I should have said, but that's not very polite, I wrote an email that was something along the lines of, been really busy, hope we can find another time to meet when I'm back in town longer. So I had dropped the I. Instead of I've been busy, I just said been busy. And then instead of saying I hope we can get together, I just said hope we can get together. And I was like, wow. And I looked at that email and I was like, that really happened. It's our brain it's our brain subconscious way of saying we don't want to implicate ourselves in this because we know it's not true. So a lot of our personality does come out even in email. There's a program called Emotional Spell Check for email. So if you are someone listening and you do a lot of emailing, especially because you are afraid of person to person, you might want to consider using that program. It helps you check the tone of your email.
Wow, that's interesting. I had never heard of that thing before, and I'd actually forgotten that this is part of your training. And because I'm still processing even some of the creative live stuff that you had done and hadn't gotten quite to that part yet, but there was definitely a big part of what you teach along the lines of how to be a better communicator, even through your writing and things like email as well.
Yeah, I'm working on getting more because I know that in the digital age, we're having less person-to-person and even less phone conversations. The problem is there's a lack of research in this area. So, as we talked about at the beginning of the call, I'm very science-based, and so I always am trying to look for the studies that back up what I'm saying. But there just isn't that much in that realm. So I'm hoping to get more information to develop an entire course around written communication and email communication, but stay tuned. If anyone knows any, please send it my way.
Yeah, that would definitely be very interesting. It is very much the trend in our society today, how we are trending that way, for better or for worse. Sometimes I think maybe for worse, but it is what it is. So definitely we need to keep some eye out on research, and I'll look into that as well because I'm fascinated with that. I wanted to ask you, especially for people who are passive and introverted, maybe just in general, and sometimes we have to deal with difficult people in our lives, people that aren't always very nice to us, maybe people that are kind of aggressive or even a bit manipulative and regarding us. I'm curious what advice you may have where our body language might help us in those types of situations. Anything in mind that we could maybe put into practice for dealing with those types?
Yeah. So this is with dealing with specifically difficult people, right?
Right.
That's okay. So I just wrote a post on 4 types of difficult people. Now, this isn't a completely body language-based post, but I had been dealing with a couple of difficult people and reading some studies on the different personality types, and I basically identified that there are 4 difficult types of people. So you can tell me if you agree with me or not. I'm sure as I'm speaking, you'll be like, oh, yeah, I know that kind of person. So the 4 difficult kinds of people are, 1, the downers. So these are people who are very critical, very pessimistic. Like they walk into a room and it's like, wah, wah, everything's wrong. They never have anything good to say. Then there's the one-uppers. And these are people who always want to one-up you. So like you'll tell a story and they have an even funnier story, or they love to name drop, they show off, they mention who they know. They're always trying to be superior, be impressive, one-up. They always are thinking about what they're going to say next as opposed to actually listening to what you're saying. Then there are the passives. Passives shut down completely especially when they're nervous. So you ask them questions, they give you one-word answers, they don't ask you anything back. It's very difficult to make conversation with them. They also don't like making decisions. So you ask them, so where do you want to go to dinner? Wherever you want, right? They don't want to, right. They're afraid to make a decision. So they're very, very passive. And the last one are tanks. And tanks get very intense with their emotions. So they can be pretty neutral, but all of a sudden when they get excited or upset or angry, it's like they bowl you over or roll over with their emotions, that intense emotions. They tend to get a little bit in your face sometimes with their opinions, a little bit over the top, and everyone's always telling them, take a chill pill, calm down, it'll be all right. So the thing with those different personality types is, one is you have to realize that you cannot fix them or change their mind. So this is not a body language thing, but we'll get into the body language in a second. It's very important when you're dealing with those people that you're not their savior and you will not be able to say anything to convince them. I've found that once people give that up, they actually are able to make a better connection, and typically the difficult person will calm down themselves anyway. But the problem is when a difficult person, for example, if you're trying to get a passive to have an opinion, the way is not to say, what's your opinion? Come on, answer. That usually makes them shut down even more. So if you just let it go and sort of accept them for as they are, they will typically become a better version of themselves. And by the way, we are all a difficult person on our worst day. So everyone falls into one of these, everyone falls into one of these things on their worst day. For me, I am a tank on my worst day. I get very excited. I get very enthusiastic. Sometimes when I'm nervous, I also go into detective mode and I like pelt people with questions. So, I am constantly in my head. I'm telling myself, calm down, take a chill pill. Like I tell that to myself, especially when I'm nervous. So we're all one of these people. So when people just sort of accept us for that, we tend to relax. In terms of a body language perspective, openness is the best thing you can do with a difficult person. The problem is when we're around difficult people, all four of the personalities, we tend to get very defensive. So we cross our arms over our chest. We usually peer down our nose at them, which is the nonverbal cue for judgment. That's when we tip our head back and we peer down our nose at someone. It's like we're criticizing them or sizing them up. It's what people do when they're skeptical. That's usually it's like I'm in a pitch meeting. I know that someone is not believing my pitch, or I do a lot more work convincing them when they're doing that pose. So to keep your head really level, uncross your arms, and then point your toes and torso towards them. That is a nonverbal sign of respect. And so by doing this, you can oftentimes get them to calm down and relax around you so they become more open.
That's interesting. I was thinking how I respond sometimes in those situations, and I definitely can see even kind of, pointing down toward them, in terms of looking at them, crossing my arms. I find sometimes if I'm at a table, sometimes I might even back up a little bit in my chair. Like I'm trying to put distance between me and them.
Yeah, so that's called distancing, and definitely something that people do. It's another defensive maneuver. So distancing happens when there's something in front of us or something has been said that we do not like. So we can do distancing either by backing up our chair, taking a step back, or leaning our head back. You'll notice people do this also when they lie because they're trying to not implicate themselves in the lie. So that's a really keen observation that you do that, because that is definitely something that we do naturally when we don't like what's been put in front of us.
That's fascinating. I love talking to you. I love talking about this topic. This has been such a great thing, and I could probably talk for another hour on this, but I'm going to be respectful of your time. And actually, like I said at the beginning of this course, I had read some stuff like this in magazines here and there, not nearly as thorough as what I've seen from you. But I think, like I said, the missing thing for me was actually seeing it demonstrated. I could read about things, but really when I saw it demonstrated, it really made a big difference for me to see, okay, this is kind of what this is saying, and to go through all of this. And I know you've got a lot of really cool products, and I wanted to see if you might just take a minute or so to tell my listeners about some of the products that you offer on your site that they may want to buy and take a part of.
I agree. Yeah, thanks so much. I had read body language books before, and it was like so hard to get the concepts when they're not being demoed in front of you. And I've written it at Body Language Book, and it's hard to teach body language in a book. So yeah, we have 3 different video courses. So one of them is the Power of Body Language, which is the Creative Live course, and that's body language from basics to advanced. So it will take you all the way through. And the nice thing is the science can be used anywhere. Business, dating, social situations, and that's what's great. It's very, very versatile science. That also includes lie detection. Now we have a separate course on lie detection for people who specifically want to learn that. And that is just how to be a human lie detector, which is about a 3 or 4 hour course on the science of lie detection, which is 7 steps to be able to learn how to do lie detection. And the last course we have is body language for entrepreneurs. So I noticed I'm an entrepreneur, so that we use a very specific kind of body language when we're pitching, when we're networking, when we're trying to sell ourselves or our products. And so that's a program specifically for entrepreneurs, and it's all online. So we have about 7,000 students, and they're all over the world, which is nice. They can take it on their own time.
That's really good. I was curious about the lie detection. I didn't want to really talk about it in this show because our whole series right now was over assertiveness. But I was curious your thoughts of who would probably really benefit from things like that. I'm sure people in law enforcement and teachers would maybe benefit from that. But is there really some unique aspects of just being a better person, a better communicator that people can pick up from a course like that? Or is it better to stay geared toward more of the general kind of body language type courses?
It's interesting you ask that. It is a very complex science. It is not for the faint of heart. The funny thing is we have all kinds of students take it. I mean, from parents to poker players to teachers to FBI agents to police people in the police force. I say if you have a genuine interest in reading people on a much deeper level, awesome. Otherwise, it's very, very serious and complicated, and so it's not for someone who just wants to dabble, if that makes sense. It's not a dabbling course. I mean, it's a lot of fun. It will completely change the way that you view people in a good way. It's like one of my students said, it's like I entered the world in high definition. That's what he said. So that's sort of the difference. You can also watch. I have a free promo up of the course. So you can get an idea of kind of what it is before diving in, which I completely understand.
Well, it's great. I mean, I think you have some great offerings. I would definitely recommend all of my listeners to check out Vanessa's products. I think they're really good. Love the work that you're doing, Vanessa. Thank you for joining us today. Thanks for the amazing tips, the information. There's so much more I know that's out there that you've done, and that's why I definitely want to encourage people to check out your products.
No, thank you so much for having me, and remember, you guys can always reach out to me on my website. I love hearing from readers.
That's great, and I'll have the link to Vanessa's site in the show notes, but again, that's scienceofpeople.com is where you can reach out and find Vanessa. So Vanessa, thanks again so much. Thanks so much for joining us today and sharing with us all these amazing tips.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks. Well, I hope that you enjoyed that as much as I did. I think Vanessa is just an amazing woman who has tapped into some amazing research. She has a great ability to take research and synthesize it down to a very practical level and just really appreciate what she's doing, appreciate what she's done just in the limited number of weeks that she's been in my life and that I've known of her and I've learned of her. It's really changed a lot. Like I said in the interview, now I'm starting to hear this, not only in myself, but in other people as well. The question inflection that she talked about, I heard it again today. Somebody was talking and they were saying something like, well, this report shows that we increased and then we may actually see that the program is actually working. They would do this. They would basically phrase it like a question. And it was so fascinating that I can see this in action. And I'm starting to see, just the other day, I was speaking to a very executive person. And this is a person that I have found challenging to really get to know, a very hard person to know. But I was noticing how I was behaving and how I had a tendency to put my hands in my pockets because I was maybe a little intimidated or putting them behind my back. And how Vanessa talked about in the interview about our hands are really the first thing that people notice. We always think they notice a person's smile or a person's eyes, but it's really our hands that people notice. And open hands with people show a sign of trust. And so I deliberately started doing this, and I had to consciously think about it while I was talking to this executive, that I had to open my hands and be there, be open to this person and quit kind of shoving them in my pants pockets. And it's just amazing how little bit things like this really do make a difference. And you should study other people. Study other people who are really good communicators, people that you really admire, and notice what they do with their bodies. It would amaze you how a lot of what you really are attracted to in people's communication styles are much more about how they do their bodies than anything else. Well, I hope that we can get Vanessa back on the show at some later point. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I am hopeful that I can actually work with Vanessa on some statistical studies coming up. And if I do, I'll make sure I let you know about that. And then hopefully we can pull her back in at some point. I would love to circle back around at some point and do a whole series over body language. Maybe we'll actually take Vanessa's book that she wrote over body language, or maybe one that she recommends, and we go through it on this show sometime in the future, and then we have her on a couple of times, maybe if she's willing, and talk about this from her perspective. So next week, we are going to get into Chapter 8, which is called Being Present, Giving Your Opinion. Now, we talked about how assertiveness doesn't always have to be verbal. It can be nonverbal. Many times you may sit in silence or walk away or do nothing. But there are times when you need to be verbal. You need to give your opinion, because if you're totally nonverbal, I would challenge if you're really being assertive at that point. No, you don't always have to say something. You don't always have to talk. But if you never talk, if you never say anything, then you may be more in the passive style, not really in the assertive style. So how can you give your opinion? What are some tips and tricks for how to do that in a better way? How can you avoid a passive way, a passive aggressive way, an aggressive way of doing that? And we're going to get a lot into that next week. And as I said earlier, check out Vanessa's programs. I'll quit saying this, but she's got some really good stuff out there. I'm telling you, it's worth at least $50 of your money to pick up her Basics of Body Language course. And if you can afford more, check out her Creative Live course, check out her lying course. But like she said, and I'll warn you as well, and she does warn people this, if you get into lying studies, it can be very helpful to you to really know the granularity of people's behavior, but you can't turn it off. Just like I told you, now I'm starting to hear the question inflection all over the place, and I can't just turn it off. Now that I know about it, it's going to always be there. And she warns people. She says, if you go and start studying lie detection, you won't be able to turn it off, and it will be there quite a bit. But I think you would just, again, greatly benefit from her courses. Well, this is going to wrap up this episode on Body Language 101 as it relates to assertiveness. Hope you've enjoyed it. As always, please consider leaving me a rating and comment on iTunes or Stitcher, any place that you listen to me. Just, again, helps get the word out, helps let people know who I am, and quite frankly, people trust and will try a podcast that has some ratings. And if they have just a few ratings, they may say, this probably isn't any good. This guy has 50 episodes and he only has 2 ratings, probably isn't very good. But people that have a lot of ratings, they'll say, hey, I'll give this a shot. And if you're joining with me on this journey of really helping people establish the first things in their life, then that is a great help. It's a great help to introduce that to other people and to help them as well. If you have any comments on this episode, I have a discussion area set up at firstthingsproductivity.com/37. And until next time, remember this: your body language is vitally important to your communication style. As we said, at least 60% of your communication, maybe upwards to 95% of your communication is coming through your body language, through your facial expressions. And we need to really study this. For instance, we didn't really talk about this. Vanessa talks about this in her training. There is definitely a difference between a genuine smile and a fake smile. And many times, I think most of us have been learned to train to smile, even though we may not want to smile. And when you really understand, you can detect a fake smile. And I thought I was really good at faking it. I thought, yeah, I can fake it and I can have this little smirk or anything like that. But now that I've learned a lot of this stuff from Vanessa, I realize that it is very apparent that I'm not really happy. There's certain types of things that happen to our face, around our eyes, and different things like that really let us know when we're really happy and we're really smiling. So anyway, study your body language, record yourself, videotape yourself, practice how you use your hands, how you use your voice, how you express your face, how you stand. All of these things are very important, and they are huge catalysts to really establishing an assertive style of communication. You cannot be assertive if you don't deal with your body language. And as we said in the interview, if you deal with your body language, it has this strange phenomena of actually changing how you think and how you feel more assertive. So if you're struggling with being more assertive, it could be how you're positioning your body in being assertive. So think about that and study yourself and let me know how it goes. And as always, embrace today with passion and intention, and don't die with your music still inside you.